A nationwide strike and widespread protests across Israel. Today, thousands of protesters blocked major roads, businesses also closing. There are rallies happening in cities and towns across the country. They are demanding an end to the war in Gaza and a deal for the return of hostages held there. CNN's Oren Lieberman is in Hostages Square in Tel Aviv. What are you hearing from people, and how potentially influential will it be?
From the numbers of people we have seen on the streets and in the surrounding area, from the crowds we have tried to get through with some success because the streets are packed so densely, I think it's safe to say this is easily one of the largest, if not the largest, protest we've seen against the war since it started nearly 2 years ago. And it came together only in the last week. Organizers from both hostage families as well as bereaved families from October 7th called for a grassroots nationwide strike today, and it has taken place throughout the entire day. There are hundreds, if not thousands, just around me right here, and the closer you get to Hostages Square, which is still a few hundred meters behind us, the more packed it gets. You may even be able to hear the noise from the chanting, the drums, the cheers, the chants from Hostages Square itself, and that gives you just a sense of how many people are here. This all started at 6:29 this morning. That's the time of the Hamas-led attack from October 7th, so it is incredibly symbolic. It began with road closures at major intersections across the country as protesters and demonstrators blocked major intersections. From there, it grew and it spread. Throughout the day, we have seen protests across Israel demanding an end to the war, some calling for the end of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's time leading the country. That all led to a march, which we followed as it led to Hostages Square, and then the main event, packing Hostages Square. Organizers say there are 300, perhaps even 400,000 people in the square itself and blocking the surrounding streets. And that's why it's so easy to get a sense here of the energy, of the calls for an end to the war and the demand to come to a deal to bring home the remaining 50 hostages, 20 of whom are still believed to be alive. Now, in the weekly cabinet meeting, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu tried to dismiss the strike today, saying it strengthens Hamas and that it's the destruction of Hamas that's necessary right now. This, of course, coming just days after Netanyahu and the Security Cabinet approved Israel's takeover and occupation of Gaza City. Protesters we've spoken with here see that as a death sentence for the hostages. It endangers the hostages, it endangers the country itself, they say, because of the split. And we see that rift here, the rift between what the government is calling for and what the protesters here are demanding. Organizers say for them, this is just the beginning. So a key question is, where does this go from here? Hundreds of thousands, organizers say, on the streets tonight in a unified call for bringing home the hostages and an end to the war. Again, they promise this is the beginning, and this they say will continue until they see that vision, a vision of the end of the war, realized.
And then, Oren, I also want to ask you about some leaked audio of a former Israeli intelligence chief where he discusses the situation in Gaza.
So this came out just a couple of days ago. It was leaked audio recordings from Israel's Channel 12 News. This is Major General Aharon Haliva, who is the former head of Israeli military intelligence. In part of these lengthy leaked audio recordings, he says here, and I'm quoting from the hostages, from the recordings, the fact that there are already 50,000 dead in Gaza is necessary and required for future generations. He says, and I'm quoting again here, for everything that happened on October 7th, for every one person on October 7th, 50 Palestinians must die. It doesn't matter now if they are children. After these audio recordings were leaked, he issued a statement to Channel 12 saying these occurred in a private forum. Obviously, these statements have been condemned, especially as Israel has faced increasing criticism for the military's conduct of the war in Gaza. This certain to add to that criticism.
All right, Oren Lieberman in Tel Aviv. Thanks so much. All right, let's get more analysis now on this. Aaron David Miller is a former U.S. State Department Middle East negotiator. He's also a senior fellow at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. Aaron, great to see you. You've been with us many times now discussing the hostage crisis, the war in Gaza. Today is one of the biggest and most widespread protests that we've ever seen up until now, as you saw with Oren's reporting there. What kind of impact do you think it might have?
Yeah, Fred, first of all, thanks for having me. You know, in a country just shy of 10 million people, it's rather remarkable. You can put several 100,000 people out in the streets. The organizers, one of the hostage groups, claimed that if you add those Israelis throughout the country, not just in Tel Aviv, you end up with over 2 million. And again, in a country under 10 million, it's impressive. Those are very impressive numbers. I hope it continues. I think pressure on the government is critically important. This Israeli government clearly has more focus on avenging the dead than it does on redeeming the living. Not that's not important to fundamentally erode and eviscerate Hamas's military capacity. But Fred, I'm afraid that the only numbers that really count in terms of influence in changing Israeli policy is 60 plus 1. And that is what you need in the Israeli Knesset in order to govern. And I think what this government has shown, the average length of a government, Israeli government since independence is 1.9 years. This government's been up and running since November, December 2022. And frankly, as I see it, it's likely that it may go to term with elections in the first part of 2026. So impressive on the streets today. Great sympathy for what's happening and empathy, but determinative, probably not.
Yeah, the images are extraordinary. And I also want to play something Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu said earlier. Take a listen and look.
Those who are calling today for an end to the war without defeating Hamas not only harden Hamas's position and delay the release of our hostages, they also ensure that the horrors of October 7th will be repeated and that we will be forced to fight an endless war.
All right, so he's blaming protests as potentially delaying the process of trying to release hostages.
I mean, I don't think that's right. There are any number of points, and Hamas has a huge responsibility, not only for the willful and indiscriminate killing of Israeli civilians on October 7th, but the mutilation, the degradation, the taking of hostages, the execution of hostages. But the reality is, I think for any number of reasons, this particular prime minister, who is unique in the annals of the political history of Israel, on trial for bribery, fraud, and breach of trust in a Jerusalem district court, 4 years now and running, has a stake, frankly, in maintaining himself in power. And that means not ending the war, certainly not short of what he considers to be total victory. And look, most Israeli security officials, probably even the ones that are currently serving him, have probably reached the conclusion that what the IDF has done to Hamas has fundamentally destroyed its capacity to ever again mount anything like October 7th. Prime Minister wants total victory, wants the disarmament of Hamas, the end of its influence in Gaza. If that could be achieved, it would be great. But at what cost, Fred? At the cost of the lives of the hostages, the suffering of their families, and the immense suffering, the humanitarian catastrophe that has befallen the people of Gaza. Hamas will be there, and the Israelis can continue to have at it. The hostages and the suffering of the people of Gaza, all of that needs to be addressed and alleviated.
The attention of President Trump, has turned to Ukraine for the moment. I mean, what are the indicators to you that resolving the conflict in Gaza is a priority or remains a priority for this White House?
I mean, I think right now the bigger play, and it's quite clear, is Russia-Ukraine. That may clearly has distracted whatever focus the administration has put on the situation in Gaza. And for Donald Trump, I think, I know the claim that he's ended 6 or 7 wars. The fundamental, the tough conflicts that he's claimed to have ended or be on the cusp of ending, Russia-Ukraine, Israel-Hamas, and of course Iran, he's batting 0 for 3 on those. And I think the reality, I participated in a lot of summits. Many of them failed. If you want a successful negotiation, you've got to be willing to use not just honey and incentives. You've got to be able to use vinegar and disincentives. And I think the balance there, both in the Israeli-Hamas negotiations and clearly given what's transpired from Anchorage forward, is a reluctance, I think, to use the leverage at the disposal of the United States to press Putin The president seems to be headed in an opposite direction.
All right. Aaron David Miller, always great to see you. Thank you so much.
Fred, thanks for having me. Great to be with you.